Right there. Welcome back to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with your host, David Charlton. So, after listening closely to Doug's conversations over the previous 2 weeks, and because of a series of discussions I've had with coaches, sports psychologists, parents, and athletes alike, I've decided to reshape how this series is going to look. Over the next 8 weeks, you can expect a number of solo episodes where I hone in on each of the measures of mental toughness. So the 4 C's and then their 2 subcomponents. And in doing so, I'm also going to focus in on the coach-athlete relationship. It's an area which I'm massively passionate about, as I've got friendships with many coaches. I've coached myself in different sports, and then recently I've just got back into it in grassroots football, helping my son's teams out. Another key reason for taking the podcast down this route for 8 weeks is that a high percentage of athletes that I do support end up talking about coaches an awful lot and their struggles with confidence, understanding what coaches want from them, coach pressure, anxieties about talking to coaches, and so on. And I also know that coaches want to know, why does an athlete train brilliantly, but then they disappear when it comes down to competing? Why do they say they want it, but then they don't do the extras? Why does feedback motivate some players? Why are they confident one week, but full of doubt the next week? Why do they keep making the same mistakes, even when we worked on them time and again? Why do they blame refs, teammates, or luck, instead of actually looking at themselves in the mirror? These are big questions that coaches want to know more about. So it's important, in my opinion, to educate everybody about some of these issues and why they happen. And they are connected to some of the nuances and complexities around mental toughness. And ultimately, a big aim of mine is to make sure, or to help athletes, kids especially, and coaches to have a more positive experience. So many athletes, especially kids, drop out. They're quite negative about their sport. And then there's coaches too who are running themselves ragged and aren't doing things in an effective way. When we think about children, kids, and young adults, our brains aren't fully developed until we're about 30. So what that means is their ability to cope with different challenges and likely their level of mental toughness isn't at a high level. So I think it's important for me to hone in on some of these different aspects, consider a high level of mental toughness, and then the lower levels. So today what we're going to do is we're going to hone in on life control, what it is, how it affects coaches and athletes alike. I'd like you to think about a scale of 1 to 10. And I'm going to talk through a situation here where we've got a coach who rates him or herself as an 8 or above, so high, and then an athlete who is low, so less than 3. And we're going to talk about why they clash, but yet how they could also be a powerful partnership. I'm guessing if you're a coach, you'll have coached many athletes who appear to be stuck, who appear to be always tired. They always have a reason why they couldn't train, why they couldn't do the extras, or they might half believe things will work out somehow. And coaches, I know, having talked to them, they get frustrated. Parents, they get frustrated too if it's your child, and especially the coach who just gets on with things, the coach who sees solutions, who believes that effort changes everything, and commitment. So yeah, we're going to talk about a misunderstood clash here in sport and why these coaches and these athletes can drive each other mad. So the high life control coach takes on loads, works long hours, believes in pushing through, sees problems as puzzles, believes that mindset changes outcomes. They don't wait, they act, they organize, they plan, and they genuinely believe that people can do more than they think. But for an athlete, especially a young athlete, that energy can sometimes feel really overwhelming. You've got to remember, this person is still trying to figure out who they are, what they're all about. Their levels of self-awareness are very, very low. They don't even appreciate why they play the sport. They're just in it. And this athlete basically thinks that things just happen to them. They feel that training is just something that's imposed on them, especially the nature of training and practice these days, which is often simply structured by coaches, and it's so organized. This athlete's motivation comes and goes. It appears that their confidence is fragile, and then excuses, well, They go on to protect their self-esteem. But from the outside, from a coach, it can look lazy. Actually, though, the athlete is often feeling helpless inside. And that's something that's really important for people to recognize. So why the tension? Why do they collide? Why do they clash? So the high control sports coach lives in this, I make things happen. You should be making things happen. That low control athlete lives in the world of things just happen to me. They appear quite relaxed. But as you'll see from the episodes as we move forward, there's a lot more complexity around that too. Now thinking about the coach who says take responsibility. While the athlete hears, I'm failing. When the coach says, push yourself, this athlete thinks, I'm not good enough yet. And then when that happens, the athlete just doesn't lean in. They don't do the extras. Simply, they just protect themselves. It's important, though, to think about this low life control and how it influences the athlete more. What's good about it? And why and what is it that high life control coaches often miss? So, the low life control athlete often is quite sensitive emotionally. And this might not be a bad thing because they're good at reading people. It means that they can be quite creative. They can be adaptive if paralysis by analysis and anxiety doesn't take over. They can be big picture thinkers if they're involved by coaches. They can feel things really, really deeply, which means when it comes down to flow states, they can really, really feel and experience a flow state an awful lot differently to others. However, they can struggle with structure. They don't need less expectation. They just need better scaffolding. So here's some advice for coaches. So what coaches can do, if we think about tasks and goal setting, they can chunk them down. Don't give them this huge mountain, just simply give them the next step. So coaches really need to watch their words with this type of athlete. Instead of saying train harder, how about thinking about a small space of time, let's say 10 minutes in this case, and asking a really good question of the athlete. What's one 10-minute block that you can do today? And then opening up a conversation about what would be really helpful, what would be effective, and what should be that focus point in that 10-minute block. They're going to feel listened to, heard, and they're going to view it very differently to train harder. Prioritizing now. This is something that athletes who have low life control really, really do struggle with. So help them, guide them, ask them what matters today, what matters this week, what's important, what can wait, questions like that. And again, the key here is asking them good questions. Helping them reorganize their time, again, is really, really important here. So can we emphasize the fact that working smarter is key? And it might be that you have to, as a coach, show them how to fit training around their life. Show them how you fit your coaching around your life. Give them some case studies. Something else for coaches to consider is trying to change the perception of the athlete. Now, I recognize coaches have a difficult job. Often, many coaches are chasing their tail. They've got so many different aspects of the role which pulls them in different directions. Many are volunteers. They've got full-time jobs. They've got families. They've got kids whilst doing their coaching. But one thing to consider here is that the relationship between the coach and the athlete matters an awful lot. So I alluded to asking questions before and thinking about your language. Now, I'm just going to talk about some work from a sport and exercise psychologist, researcher who's based in Loughborough, Sophia Jowett. She spent a large chunk of her time over the last few decades looking at the coach-athlete relationship. And it tells us 4 things that matter an awful lot. We've got closeness. So the athlete wants to know if they're understood. Then we've got commitment. Do the coach and athlete stick with each other? Complementarity. That was a mouthful, that was. Do our styles work together? Co-orientation. Another mouthful. Do we see things the same way? All these sort of little factors, these 4 C's, really do need some consideration there. It's important to emphasize here that athletes grow, they develop, they get better when they feel safe, when they're supported. And this is what this model is basically telling us. When they do feel safe, they're going to take more initiative. They're going to try more. They're going to stop hiding behind their excuses. So it's certainly worth going back and asking yourself about those 4 C's, the closeness, the commitment, the complementarity, and co-orientation. So yeah, as a coach, how can you improve that relationship? As a coach, how can you communicate in a way that gives the athlete more structure and more belief? Because let's face it, when you do that, when those two meet well, you're not going to get conflict. You're going to get development. So as I begin to wrap up this episode, I'm going to go back to those questions which I alluded to that coaches are interested in. Why does an athlete train brilliantly but disappear in competitions? In this case, I'd imagine if we think about the athlete and how they're feeling inside, perhaps they might be overwhelmed by thoughts, by doubt, by worries, and that's why they can't free themselves up. That's why they're tight, they're cautious, and they don't take risks when they're competing. Then there was the question of, why does the athlete say they want it, but they don't do the extras? Again, overwhelm's going to come into this. They may have big dreams, but yeah, they don't follow through with some of the things that they say they're going to do. And why? Because of this thing called overwhelm and the fact that they're not sure what to do. So they need some guidance there. Then there's a question of, why does feedback motivate some players but shut this one down? So again, if we're thinking about the emotional experience where this person feels like things just happen to them, that they're unlucky, they naturally focus on the negatives ultimately. So your words as a coach are going to be really, really crucial when it comes down to the feedback side. Why they're confident one week and they're full of doubt the next week. So their perceptions are likely to be skewed, aren't they? They're probably going to hone in more so on some of the negative features of their performance. If they're highly motivated, it's completely natural to think negative. But to these athletes, they're probably going to think even more deeply. They're going to experience different situations, losses, mistakes, even more deeply. Then we've got, why do they keep making the same mistakes even after we've worked on them? And again, possibly because of their perception of events. So you're going to have to work with them and really understand what's going on inside of their minds. And if overwhelm is taking over, it's their nervous system is shutting down essentially. And that is why they'll just keep on repeating and not learning. And lastly, why do they blame refs, teammates, or luck instead of looking at themselves? So they don't take responsibility. They play the blame game. And this is self-protection. They don't feel great inside. They naturally look at the negatives. These are the reasons why. So like some of the other questions there, your job as a coach is to make them feel heard, listened to, and try little by little to change their perception of events. I hope this episode has been an interesting one, thought-provoking one. It's given you a few different ideas as a coach or as a practitioner on how you can support people, how you can support athletes who have a lower sense of life control. I hope also it's helped you see the positives around this type of athlete, because ultimately, as is this podcast, Demystifying Mental Toughness, I want to try and demystify the fact that we must be strong in all areas, because that's just not realistic. With every strength, with every positive trait, there's going to be a trade-off. And this is the same here. So it's key for us not to form too many judgments. Until next week, where I'll delve into emotional control in more detail with a similar scenario. Have a great week. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.